Tonight, the Senate prepares to hand President Trump another win, $9 billion in spending cuts. Funding for global AIDS relief is spared, while humanitarian workers warn nearly 500 tons of emergency food is now set to be destroyed. A closer look at what's being cut and who's left behind. Plus, will the DOJ release more information on Jeffrey Epstein? The latest on the case that's dividing Republicans and shaking the White House. And deadly attacks, missing sailors, and a global shipping crisis. How the Houthis are shaking up the Red Sea and the world economy.
Maybe about 10% global trade now having to divert around Africa.
Plus, faith under fire, crackdowns, arrests, and surveillance. China's Christians face growing persecution, but insiders say the gospel is booming.
The more you press down, the more the church spreads.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
A last-minute deal potentially delivering a major win for the president. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. Tonight, the clock is ticking once again for Congress. This after a Senate Republican vote scaled back President Trump's request to cancel $9.4 billion in approved spending.
So what stays and what goes? CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London joins us now. London, can you bring us up to speed on what happens next?
Well, John, Jenna, now that the Senate passed its rescissions bill through a key test vote, the measure makes its way to the House. The goal is to get a final bill on the president's desk for his signature by Friday. After amendments Tuesday, Senate Republicans now estimate about $9 billion total in savings instead of the original $9.4. After growing concern over $400 million in proposed cuts to PEPFAR, the International AIDS Program, senators agreed to remove those cuts from their version. Since President George W. Bush approved the program back in 2003, it's been credited with saving millions of lives from HIV/AIDS in parts of Africa and Asia.
There was a lot of interest among our members in doing something on the PEPFAR issue, and so that's reflected in the substitute. And we hope that if we can get this across the finish line in the Senate, that the House would accept that one small modification.
And one of the three Republican holdouts, Maine Senator Susan Collins, says voting to keep PEPFAR funding in place could help the bill's prospects. President Trump is also looking to take away funding for public broadcasting. Some senators fear cuts to public media could decimate many of the 1,500 local radio and television stations, especially in rural parts of the country. Many rely on some federal funding to operate. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting distributes more than 70% of its funding to those stations. Democrats are expected to unanimously oppose the package. Here's New York Congressman Richie Torres today on the House floor.
The so-called Big Beautiful Bill is not only a redistribution of wealth from the rich, from the poor to the rich, but it's also a redistribution of wealth from America to foreign bondholders. Instead of paying $1 trillion a year in debt, we're going to pay $2 trillion a year in debt, which is money not spent on health care and housing and higher education.
Now, while PEPFAR funding is spared for now, the full package still awaits a final vote in both chambers of Congress. Under the U.S. budget law, Congress had 45 days to reappropriate the allocations, and that window closes Friday. John, Jenna.
All right, CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London. Thank you so much, London. Well, to help us better understand the effect of foreign aid cuts, we're joined now by CBN senior international correspondent George Thomas and Chelsea Sobolik, Director of Government Relations at World Relief. Welcome to the both of you. Great to see you again. Chelsea, starting with you. Most people are probably unaware about how much the government spends on foreign aid. I think it's about 1% of the total federal budget, or even why. Can you explain how it became core to American foreign policy as a demonstration of both soft power for both Republican and Democratic administrations?
Well, thank you so much for having me on to discuss this really important topic. It's a great question. Foreign assistance is, a pretty broad category, but at World Relief, we're a humanitarian organization. So what foreign assistance looks like for us is food security, PEPFAR funding, which you guys just talked about, caring for vulnerable mothers and children, And this foreign assistance has really developed over the past 30, 40 years as America's goodwill to the world. Previously, USAID stickers had "From the American People." This is something that the American people did. It wasn't an administration. It was intended to be something that we did from the American people. As Christians, foreign assistance is such a vital tool that we, as a government, have used to care for orphans and vulnerable children, to help feed starving people around the world. It was a really vital tool. Of course, churches and congregations around the world have a vital role too in supporting local communities, but it's kind of a both and, that churches and local communities serve in partnership with U.S. foreign assistance. Like you said, it's just less than 1% of our overall total budget. It costs the American taxpayers, just a couple dollars a year to support these huge programs. I will say those dollars are stretched so far globally with food. We use American farmers' food to feed around the world. So it's a vital tool. And like you said, it's a soft power tool. So that helps us counter adversaries like China and Russia and Iran in places like Africa.
George, are there any other foreign aid that you think need to be spared in this?
Yeah, I mean, based on my reporting and extensive travel around the world, there are three areas that I've seen U.S. aid make a huge impact on the ground. One is in this area of global health, when we're talking about vaccinations, anti-malaria vaccination programs, as well as maternal health. A second category I would describe as disaster and humanitarian relief. And what I mean by this, when an earthquake strikes, when a tsunami happens, when famine happens, pretty much it's the United States that is first on the scene and pours billions and billions of dollars into that disaster relief. And then a third area, which is very important in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and so forth, is this whole idea of educating girls and empowering the young generation. So getting girls to be able to go to school, providing girls and boys the opportunity to learn an education. And as I've traveled around the world, I've seen the U.S. and the U.S. government spend so much money in those three areas. And I hope, in addition to PEPFAR, that these other three areas that are so critical and in many cases life-saving will also get the money and the funding that they need so desperately.
Just a few seconds left, and we'll leave it to you, Chelsea. So we understand there's reporting that the administration plans to destroy about 500 tons of food aid grown and sold by American farmers, which you alluded to, and that's enough to feed about 1.5 million kids a week. Just real quickly, final thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, we hope that they will quickly staff up. I know there's been a number of staff reductions at State Department. We hope that they will quickly staff up so that they can, that food doesn't go to waste, that they can utilize that and feed people around the world who desperately need it.
Okay, CBN's George Thomas and Chelsea Sobolik, Director of Government Affairs at World Relief. Thank you to both of you. Well, from growing tensions in Israel to Mideast negotiations, it was a busy day at the White House.
That's right. CBN senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright joins us with details. Kelly, let's start with Israel. As you well know, Israeli officials confirm launching missile strikes today into Damascus. What's the White House saying this evening, considering ongoing efforts to strengthen relations with Syria? Of course, we remember back in May the president meeting with the new president of Syria.
Well, John, good evening to you and Jenna both. President Trump was asked this question about Israel's missile strikes in his Oval Office today about Syria, and he asked the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio to address the tensions between Israel and Syria. Rubio explaining the situation stems from recent acts of violence between Bedouins, the Druze communities, and government forces in southern Syria. Israel says it will not allow Syrian forces into the south, which is on its border. And Rubio added the tensions led to an unfortunate situation and a misunderstanding between Israel and Syria, which resulted in Israel launching its missile strikes into Syria's capital city of Damascus, striking military targets as well as the presidential compound. He engaged with the two countries all morning and all night long to de-escalate the tensions and get the two sides back on track. Different groups in southern Syria are responding, and the U.S. asked Syria to pull its forces back.
Kelly, I'm sticking with foreign policy. The president meeting with both the Crown Prince of Bahrain and the Prime Minister of Qatar today. What do we know about those meetings?
Well, the president greeted the prime minister and the crown prince of Bahrain. The two leaders discussed the long-standing relationship between the two countries, which dates back to 1893. The two announced a $17 billion investment deal that will pave the way for the two countries to establish a formal civilian nuclear energy cooperation deal. The discussion also covered security issues, trade, and the potential for Bahrain to divert its Patriot missiles to Ukraine. Also this evening, the White House will host a dinner for the Prime Minister of Qatar as both countries seek to broker a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. As you know, President Trump continues to express optimism about that deal, stating that it is imminent and will include release of the hostages, but the deal has stalled, and Hamas is concerned over how far Israel will withdraw its defense forces during a 60-day ceasefire.
Kelly, let's bring it back to domestic issues. While the president might want to focus on foreign policy, there's one story that we've all been watching that won't go away, and that's, of course, about Jeffrey Epstein. So what is the president saying tonight about the ongoing backlash, and how's the base responding?
Well, look, President Trump told reporters in the Oval Office today the Epstein case is a hoax. Here's what he posted on Truth Social. The radical left Democrats have hit pay dirt again with strong prodding by the fake news and the success-starved Dems. Jeffrey Epstein is a hoax, he states, and during his Oval Office meeting, Mr. Trump added that some Republicans have helped the Democrats in talking about Epstein. He explained that Attorney General Pam Bondi is doing her job, and she is free to release details about the Epstein case that she believes are credible. John, Jenna?
All right, CBN senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright. Thanks, Kelly. Well, up next, crew members murdered while others are missing and entire shipping routes thrown into chaos. Who's driving a wave of violence in the Red Sea? Welcome back. Tensions are escalating in the Middle East. In the Red Sea, Iranian-backed Houthi rebels have launched a deadly new wave of attacks, sinking ships, killing sailors, and threatening global trade routes.
CBN's Chuck Holton reports from Jerusalem on the renewed threat and what it means for U.S. deterrence.
In less than a week, the Houthis have sunk two commercial ships in the Red Sea, the Magic Seas and the Eternity Sea. The second attack was especially brutal. After striking the vessel with a drone, Houthi fighters boarded the ship, opened fire inside, then planted explosives on the hull. Most of the crew is now missing. Many believed dead or taken hostage.
We've had a substantial loss of life. 9 crew members we know of have been killed on board the second vessel. What they do is they force the crew to abandon ship, and then they board the vessel, and using explosive charges will sink the vessel.
These attacks are part of a broader campaign the Houthis claim is in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. The timing, though, suggests something else could be driving the escalation. Not long ago, the Trump administration quietly signaled that Iran could sell oil legally to China, undercutting the Houthis' role in Iran's smuggling network and possibly their funding.
If I were to venture a guess, it has to do with Netanyahu being in Washington and with the fact that, of course, Iran and its network of allies has been taking a bit of a beating in the last couple of months.
After pausing major maritime attacks since December, the rebels have returned aggressively and with deadly effect.
They've also really expanded the idea of what constitutes an Israeli ship. Any ship in a company that touches Israel in any way makes all the vessels in the company susceptible to attack.
The broader impact is already being felt as global shipping companies reroute to avoid the Red Sea, costing more time and money.
You know, because of the attacks, about 40% of the shipping that normally goes through in terms of vessels have routed around Africa. That represents about 60% of the total cargo. Remember, about 15% of world trade heads through this area. So you're talking about maybe about 10% global trade now having to divert around Africa.
Here at Eilat, the empty port that you see behind me represents a loss of tens of billions of dollars a year to the Israeli economy. Before October 7th, this port used to see 250,000 vehicles come through here every year, as well as agricultural products and minerals from mining. And it only took a few months of attacks from the Houthis before they had to declare bankruptcy.
Despite all this talk about a ceasefire with the U.S., the attacks on Israel continued. But indeed, we haven't seen any real attacks on merchant shipping since December last year. And they're back with a bang.
I think the kinetic response by both the United States and the Israelis at this point is not producing the results they want. The only thing that produces a result in this type of scenario, historically speaking, what we've seen happen before, is one, a blockade of Yemen that cuts off the importation of these weapons into Yemen. The problem with that is the people who will suffer from that is the population of Yemen.
What we're also seeing from these attacks is, of course, that they still have the capabilities. So despite the intense aerial attacks by both Israel and the United States since the beginning of the year, that has not been enough to deter them from attacking merchant vessels.
Although on the day of the Eternity Sea attack, no Western warships patrolled here, the presence of naval assets likely isn't enough to calm the insurance market.
The big problem here is that because of the risk posed by the Houthis, the insurance, the war risk insurance to sail vessels through, really preclude the shipping companies from wanting to come back. And as long as it's cheaper to go around Africa than through the Red Sea, those ships are going to keep going around the longer route.
Until the Houthis are neutralized or the region is made secure, global trade through the Red Sea remains at risk. From Jerusalem, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Thanks, Chuck. Coming up, China's government cracking down on churches. But believers are finding new ways to worship and grow underground. Next on Faith Nation.
Welcome back. Rising economic pressures are creating social unrest in China, and that's unleashed a new round of persecution against Christians.
Yeah, the government is arresting pastors for simply collecting offerings, and foreign missionary activities are being restricted. But even with that, the church continues preaching the gospel, and Christianity is actually growing. Gary Lane reports.
China is experiencing social unrest due to a slowing economy, thanks in part to increased tariffs on exports to the U.S. Jeff King, president of International Christian Concern, believes while the nation is approaching a tipping point, there is still hope.
Masses are fed up. They are marching in the streets, especially the students. Huge rallies going on calling for democracy. But when there is that pressure, when there is that pain, that's when people feel the need. So they're looking to democracy, which would be a wonderful thing. But what they really need is faith.
As more Chinese citizens turn to Christianity, Xi Jinping is responding with renewed crackdowns. On May 1st, his government imposed new restrictions on foreign missionaries.
For the most part, those who remain hidden will stay, probably until they're caught and thrown out.
Foreigners can't preach or teach without prior authorization, which is rarely granted without Communist Party oversight. This is why many missionaries there conceal their evangelistic activities.
Have you heard of any leaving, being forced to leave? Some left already, China?
I know nearly every foreign Christians who are missionaries, but under the name of a business or even student, and many other even tent making, like medical and even supporting the orphanage services, are totally being kicked out and banned from serving and staying in China.
The government is also demanding hymns sung in China's registered 3 self-patriotic churches be consistent with communist principles.
Every Sunday, before they sing the doxology, they have to rise up and sing the communist anthem, the national communist anthem first, to sing the praises of the communist heroes, instead of worshiping the name of Lord Jesus Christ.
Bob Fu, president of China Aid, an organization that assists persecuted Christians there, reveals the Communist Party monitors Christians through strategically placed cameras and facial recognition software.
All the 4 corners of the church, including the pulpit, has to install face recognition cameras in order to monitor all those who are attending the church worship service. And even the tithing and offering is called a foreign religious service, now is totally criminalized. especially in the house churches. So many house church pastors are arrested just because they set up an offering, a tithing box in the church.
The charge against those pastors is business fraud. Over 2 years ago, public security police arrested 3 pastors from the Lin Then Covenant Church on these charges. They went on trial in May. China Aid reports one pastor was sentenced to 2 years in prison. 2 others received more than 3.5 years.
Simply for having their church with a Sunday school and with an offering box for tithing and offering in their church.
Fu and King argue that despite Xi Jinping's crackdown, Christianity is growing in China.
Last year, they had planted 2 more churches under the heaviest persecution. So we have seen many house churches had experienced revival.
While their pastor Wang Yi serves a 9-year prison sentence, members of the Early Rain Covenant Church are igniting the fires of revival.
I can never understand, the Marxist leaders, how they don't get this. The more you press down, the more the church spreads. Christians have a long history of dealing with chains and oppression, and again, nothing stops them. It's such a great story.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
Thank you, Gary. Coming up, a Texas football player's touching tribute to Texas flood victims. Next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, a senior safety for the Texas Longhorns uses his moment in the spotlight to honor neighbors in need.
Yeah, this is really sweet. Michael Taff spoke to reporters during the Southeastern Conference Media Days about his tie. It was stitched with the initials of each Camp Mystic flood victim, including 2 18-year-old camp counselors who risked their lives to save younger girls.
Just wanted to share light on something that's way more important, and I wanted to make sure that these girls were remembered for heroes, and because that's who they are. They should be remembered as heroes.
Indeed, and Taff wants the country to know what Texas is dealing with right now and offer any support he can.
What a great way to utilize his time in the spotlight to shine it on the needs of others.
Yeah, and at a young age, he understands that. That's tremendous.
He's got a tremendous platform, and I would suspect a tremendous future.
Yeah. All right, that's going to do it for Faith Nation.
Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.